Ciao amici, I'm Leo Spizzirri, and today, with my friends at Breville, I'm going to show you how to make the perfect deep dish pizza. So, let's start by making the dough. The first thing that's really important to remember is that when we make dough, I've got all of my recipes listed in grams because it's the most exact way to do this at home. Even if you are an amateur baker, getting yourself a digital scale is the quickest, easiest way to do this. And these are really cheap. You can even get them at your local grocery store now. So get yourself a digital scale and follow me. So in order to start making dough, we're going to need a bowl. I'm going to have a pretty large bowl here to start. The worst thing that can happen is you start mixing dough and you find out that the bowl is too small and everything starts coming out of the sides. So make sure you have a bowl that's large enough that you can get your hands in there and do this whole process and make it nice and clean, because if anything's falling out of this bowl, your dough recipe is going to change. So the first thing that we're going to do, I'm going to take my water. This is 455 grams of water. I prefer to use room temperature water for this one. My water's in the bowl, and the next thing that I'm going to add in, this is 7 grams of malt. Non-diastatic malt is the best. Non-diastatic malt is going to give a color on this crust that's really beautiful and golden brown, and it's going to make this pizza really stand out. And then the next thing that we're going to do, I'm going to take my yeast. This is 11 grams of instant dry yeast. I'm going to sprinkle this on top of the water as well. Even though instant yeast doesn't need to be activated, this is another step that'll just keep everything moving nice for you and just make a beautiful homogeneous dough. Now, once I have this in here, I'm going to use my hands. I make a joke all the time, like back in the wrestling days, make the iron claw, turn it sideways, and you have a perfect whisk, right? So with this sideways hand, I'm going to grab my flour here, right? Now, with my flour, I'm going to put in maybe about almost half of it. This way, what I'm going to try to do is build this like paste, if you will, something that's thicker than pancake batter. And you'll notice that in my action, you don't have to do this very quickly. Do it at your own speed. I'm using the side of my hands against the bowl as kind of like a scraper. We're going to keep mixing here, and you'll see how fast this starts to come around. I'm not too worried at this point about lumps because the lumps will come out in the kneading process. From here, now that I've got this nice paste going, I'm going to go and gradually add a little bit of flour at a time. So if you used half of the flour up front, think of this as maybe another quarter of the flour and continue turning your flour in the bowl. This is very different than the other Chicago styles that are much drier. This has a lot of water, so this one's pretty easy to mix it by hand. You can also do this easily in the same order that I'm doing this with the Breville stand mixer. Now, as I'm going around, again, using my side of my hand, I'm turning the bowl, making sure that all the ingredients that are on the side are incorporated in. And you'll see that without a lot of work here, this dough is starting to come together. Now that I've got this as this kind of really sticky, shaggy mess, this is the perfect time to go ahead and again add about a quarter of that flour. As I'm going around now, I can actually start lifting this out of the bowl. But what you notice is underneath the dough itself, we have a lot of flour. We don't want to try to force too much flour in at one time. And if you notice that on one side you have all this flour and on the other side you have this sticky, shaggy mess, don't be afraid to take the dough and kind of flip it over onto the sticky side, and it'll pick up that as well. As I'm continuing to turn my hands, the dough is picking up the flour, and you'll notice that I'm not kneading. I'm actually taking and I'm squeezing my fingers together. That flour is getting picked up, and I can feel it coming through my fingers, mixing to the perfect point. If you have to stop during this process and you have this dirty hand, right? The worst thing that you can do is this action. And you know who you are out there, the ones that take there and they make all those little beads and all that. We never want to do that because all those little bits of dough that were stuck to your hand, if we're going to try to mix those in, they might not get incorporated. And then all of a sudden, when you bake your pizza, you might find some of those dry flour bits in there, which is not very good eats. So I'm going to keep mixing like this and turning this bowl. There's not a lot of flour left in the bottom of the dough, which is telling me that it's time for another addition. And again, very slowly and gently, I'm going to add about a quarter of the flour that's remaining, and I'm going to continue this over and over until it's all mixed in. We also have two ingredients left over. I have my salt and I have my fat. In this case, I'm going to be using lard. And I know there's a lot of people out there that get freaked out by talking about using lard, but I grew up in the restaurant industry here in Chicago, and lard is par for the course. If you're going to try to make this as traditional as possible, and I'm talking about making a copycat even of some of the historic deep dish pizza joints that are in Chicago, those places more than likely are still using lard because it's how it all originated. Now, you can see that I can physically start lifting this dough. It's coming away from the bowl. Almost all of the flour is incorporated and it's still a little bit sticky. This is the point now that I'm ready to add my salt. When almost all of my flour is in, I'm at that little sticky point, and now this is going to be the perfect time to go ahead and just add it to the top. Because now, as we're mixing this, again, squeezing with my fingers, there's still enough moisture inside of this dough to absorb that salt. So don't be afraid that, oh, we're going to put salt in and it's too early, there's no water, it's not going to dissolve. I'm telling you, trust me, it's going to dissolve. As I'm going around here, I can feel that now the salt is inside. It feels like it's at a good spot. And this is the point I'm going to make my final addition of flour. All my flour is in. Again, don't forget scraping with the sides of your hands. I'm going to continue to clean the sides of this bowl until everything is all in. It's really critical that you wait until there's no more flour in the bowl to put the fat in, because the worst thing that we can do is get that fat stuck to the flour and it never will mix out. As we're mixing, I also remember that when I was younger, my grandmother used to take the dough on this final step. Sometimes on the drier doughs that we make, sometimes it's going to be a little tough to get the last of that flour in there. So she used to take the dough and actually spread it open a little bit. And again, what are we doing? We're spreading it open to expose the tacky part of this dough. And you can see that it's kind of sticking a little bit. So again, I feel like I'm just going to take it, turn it over. And at this point, this is the first time I'm actually going to start giving this a slight knead in the bowl. I'm taking the dough from the edge, I'm folding it towards me, and then pushing down with the heel of my hand. At this point, I'm going to go ahead with my lard. I'm going to take probably about half of this, and I'm going to give this a nice smear all over, all you bagel fans in New York. I'm going to grab the edge, fold it over, and push down. Now what we're doing is we're folding that lard into the strands of the gluten themselves. This dough is going to be so beautiful when you bake this pizza because those gluten strands now are like almost lubricated. So this is going to be a very light, airy pizza. Considering we have a pizza that's going to be topped pretty heavy, this is one of the things that we're known for, Chicago deep dish. And I got all my buddies in New York that see it and they come to town and we take them all the time for a deep dish pizza, and they all give me the joke that they feel like they got agita and all that. So all you New York guys, don't worry, I love New York pizza myself, and I got some of the greatest friends in Brooklyn and all that kind of thing. But go ahead, try this. I dare you guys from New York to make a deep dish pizza. So the last of my lard, I'm going to give again that nice little smear on top of the dough. This is one of those beautiful moments that now, as my warm hand is starting to get in there and I can feel that that lard is starting to melt, I get that beautiful aromatic of the fat, right? I did a couple of demonstrations recently where I made this dough and I replaced the lard with rendered bacon fat. So if you play that game and every Sunday morning when you make your bacon and eggs for your family and you love to make that bacon, pull that bacon fat off, put it in that. My grandma used to have a little coffee can on the side of the stove, and she would always dump it out of the cast iron skillet right into there. So if you have one of those, try replacing the lard with bacon fat, because all of a sudden this dough will have this gorgeous, beautiful, almost little salty note in the background, and whoever's eating it along with you is going to say, wow, how did you do that? Don't tell them, it's our secret, right? This is almost all the way incorporated. And if you can see, all of a sudden my dough is starting to get this beautiful shiny sheen to it. It's starting to get really smooth. I can feel now that this dough is starting to come together really nicely. It's at the right point of its life where it's ready to come out to the counter for the first time. I'm going to keep turning like this, and then with a little bit of luck, I'll be able to pull it out in one shot. Now, as we go to the counter, I've got this beautiful granite countertop here, right? If you're doing this at home, I would prefer that you did it on a surface like a piece of granite, maybe some stainless steel. If you have wooden countertops, this might be a little tricky because all this stuff that's going to be in this dough still is going to start sticking to the wood. And when we roll dough by hand, I'm taking the dough from the edge, folding it about a third of the way in, and then with the palms of my hands, I'm pushing forward and I'm rolling. And as I continue to roll in this method, this dough still looks like it's sticking to the counter a little bit, but we need to give it a couple minutes to start to catch up to us. The dough is going to work on its own pace, and we need to allow it to do that. The seam side is up. Where is that seam coming from? It's coming from the action of me rolling and pulling backwards. We're going to roll and pull backwards until we get this thing to about the shape of a nice burrito, right? And then once you have that nice shape, I lift it up. This is the top side. We're going to flip this over. So now it's vertical. Here's my seam. And at that point, again, we're starting again. I don't know if you have kids, but I got 3 little girls at home, and this is one of the things that as soon as I bring the dough onto the counter and I start getting in there with my hands, and they see that my hands are all nice and sticky, that's the first time that they want to come up with the stool to the counter and say, "Let me help." This is a great dough for you to do with them because it's a lot of fun. It's not really a lot of work, and all I'm doing is just massaging this back and forth. All these little stuff that's here, all of a sudden you're going to start to see that as I continue this folding back and forth and rolling it back and forth, my countertop is starting to look clean now for the first time. This is the perfect sign that my dough is almost at the final stages of development. So what we're going to do is we're going to need to rest this dough for a little bit. At that point, once the dough is rested, you're going to be able to take this dough, divide it into dough balls. This particular recipe will make you about 375-gram dough balls. And that's going to be enough to make 3 pizzas. So now I can feel that this dough is becoming really smooth and elastic. And this is the final point that I feel that this dough is ready for a little nap. We're going to need to rest this dough. So if you look at this dough now as I'm going to continue turning this, my counter has become nice and clean. All this dough is becoming smooth and shiny. The last thing I want to tell you about is that some variations of Chicago deep dish pizza include cornmeal. Some of those pizzerias that are very historic put cornmeal in the dough. I've got a little bit of coarse ground cornmeal right here. And if you wanted to put cornmeal in the dough, the easiest way to do this is give a little sprinkling on the counter. And then when you're about to do that final turn of this dough, push the dough into the cornmeal, pull back, and all of a sudden it's stuck. And we're going to be folding this ever so gently in here. Depending on how much cornmeal you like, if you like that crunch inside of this dough, I would say don't put more than 1 ounce of cornmeal. Again, just a little bit of cornmeal on the counter. Take the dough, flip it inside, and with a couple turns, all of a sudden, it's naturally just folding into the dough without overworking or kneading this dough. And all of a sudden, we have this gorgeous dough ball that's ready to go. Our next step is very important. This needs to rest. We just did a lot of work to push all of this flour into that water and all these different ingredients. So the dough is going to need a little bit time now so that it can absorb that water into the flour. So the best thing to do is take your dough, put it on a counter, or in this case, I'm going to put it on this board, and I'm going to take the bowl that I used for mixing, and I'm just going to flip it over here, and we're going to create like this proofing chamber, let's call it, okay? This dough needs to sit here for maybe about 15-20 minutes. Divide the dough into your dough balls, and then you can either let those dough balls rise until they're double in size, or you can take those dough balls, stick them directly into your refrigerator, each in an individually sealed container, and then you can come back and use this tomorrow. Now, while this is resting, I want to show you how to make the perfect Chicago deep dish pizza sauce. I'm gonna need a large bowl for this. Again, large enough to hold all of the ingredients that we're about to mix. To this bowl, I have 28 ounces of ground tomatoes. I really like to use ground tomatoes for this, and I'm gonna explain the next step of the process because it's pretty important. I'm not a big fan of adding sugar to my sauce because I believe that a good quality tomato should be naturally sweet. I'm gonna put about a half of this sauce into this container. I'm gonna get some really good tomato paste. This is 4 ounces of tomato paste. And the reason why I'm doing this method like this is because I'm going to incorporate the tomato paste into this sauce. And because this is double concentrated tomato paste, this is where I'm getting a lot of that beautiful, robust sweetness into that sauce. This is also going to help thicken this sauce. If you were to take a saute pan or a saucepan and stick it on top of the stove and warm it up a little bit, because what's going to happen is the additional water that might be left, it'll draw some of that moisture out, and then when you cook your pizza, that tomato sauce will almost be like pasty itself, super sweet, and it's going to be very robust and you're going to love it. As I've got all of that tomato paste incorporated into this little bit of sauce here, what I'm going to do next, I'm going to take the rest of this sauce, and now we're going to go to the next ingredients. What I also have is a little bit of extra virgin olive oil here. This is about 2 ounces of oil. I'm going to pour this right on top. From here, we need a little bit of garlic. Take the garlic, smash them with your hand, and this will take the little jacket or the sweater, we might say in Italian, la maglia. We would take this off, peel this, and we've got this clove of garlic. Now, if you're one of those people that says, I don't like a lot of garlic, take this garlic clove the way it is, smash it, and then take this whole and stick it inside of the sauce. Or take this, chop it as rough or as fine as you like, and all of a sudden this sauce is going to be very, very garlicky, right? If you like that. I'm going to use one, I'm going to stick it inside just like this, and then I'm going to move ahead and I'm going to get my basil. This is about 4 nice leaves of basil. If your leaves are bigger or smaller, make an adjustment according to what you like. I'm going to take this basil in my hand and I'm literally going to smash this basil. What I'm doing here is I'm bursting the cells, releasing all that beautiful essential oil from inside the basil. I'm going to hand tear these inside. If you like to use a knife, go ahead and you can chop the basil if you like. But for me, this really traditional is just taking the basil like this, hand tearing it, and put it just like this inside the sauce. Next ingredient, we've got a little bit of salt. We need to put a little bit of salt, but the one thing that I'm going to recommend is that look at the can of tomatoes that you're choosing, because if your tomatoes are already salted, make an adjustment, because if you're adding this on top of tomatoes that are already salted, all of a sudden you're going to have a very salty pizza. I've got about 0.1 ounce. And then the last thing here that we're going to do is some oregano. Now, I love oregano. My family's from Calabria, Italy, and I bring in the oregano on bunches, dried from Calabria. So to me, this is another ingredient that I really love. I just take a little bit of oregano just like this and give a little squeeze, and all of a sudden I've got this beautiful oregano right on top of my sauce. And that's it. Now that I've got all my ingredients in the bowl, what I'm going to do is I'm using a rubber spatula that has kind of this curved edge to it because my bowl is curved. If you can use this side into, let's call it the corners of this bowl, all of a sudden you'll be able to mix this much better. And the goal of this whole mixing is to get all of that oil incorporated into the tomato until you get this beautiful shimmer on top of it, and then your sauce is done. I like to make this sauce a day ahead before I'm going to use it, because that really gives a chance of all those aromatics getting blended into that tomato, and then you have this beautiful flavor. At this point, once you have this, that all that oil is now incorporated, I would take this, put it in a saucepan, put it right on top of the stove, and warm it up a little bit. This gives you the final opportunity that if you do have a tomato that maybe has a little bit more moisture content to it, it'll give you a chance to thicken it up a little bit. So here we go. This now is all done. I'm going to warm this through, and then this is going to be ready and perfect to use. So my dough has been resting on the counter here now for about 20 minutes. It's at the right point to start dividing it. I'm going to take the cover off this bowl, move this to the side. I'm going to use a flat edge scraper. I'm going to scrape it off of the counter and I'm going to bring it here and transfer it. You'll be able to see that now with just a little bit of rest. Look at how beautiful and smooth and elastic this dough is, right? And it doesn't mean that just because we hand mix this dough, it's going to be better or worse or anything like that. But the point is that if you don't have a stand mixer at home, you don't need one to make beautiful dough. If you don't have a kitchen scale, you can divide this by just looking at it. Cut it into 3 portions. Make this into like a uniform loaf. Square it off just like this. And now we can almost see where 3 equal pieces would be. I'm going to take my cutter just like this, push all the way down to the counter till it feel that snap. I'm going to cut just straight back like this. And I've got a portion of dough here ready to go. And then here, I'm going to find the middle and I'm going to cut this just like this. This dough is very forgiving, and with the amount of yeast that I used in this formula, you're going to have the perfect pizza no matter what. So if you have a portion that might be a little bit bigger than another, as you're rolling them, you might be able to feel it in your hands that you maybe have this one in the middle that feels like it's a little bit bigger than the rest. Let's go ahead and fix this and then just give each one a little bit of extra dough, just like this. I've been making pizzas all my life. I'm a master pizzaiolo, and I've got a lot of experience doing this. My technique, if you wanted to see, is to take the dough, roll it over with your hand, pull back, and then where you have this opening, fold it over. You've got a seam, pull straight back, and then all of a sudden, you've got this beautiful smooth skin that's nice and tight. The easiest way is just to take the ends like this, bring your fingers and your hands underneath and give that dough a turn, and now you have this gorgeous, beautiful, tight dough ball. You can see how much tension we have here. If I really wanted to show off, make a couple thousand dough balls in your life and you'll be able to do this then two-handed. Everyone loves what I do. This is like a circus act in my house when I start making pizza dough. It's like, come on and roll the dough for us, please. But this is actually what we're looking for. And again, without any extra equipment, this is, again, 3 very close to about the same size dough balls all together, and we're ready now for the next step. Take these dough balls and put each one in an individual container. If you want to make pizzas today with this, let this dough ball double in size. Once it's doubled in size, you're ready to go to the next step, because what we're looking for is all those beautiful air bubbles to be created inside of this dough. And then when we go and push this out into the pan, you're going to have not only a beautiful crust that rose because of the yeast, but also Mother Nature gave us some beautiful air bubbles too from the physical work of us kneading the dough. If you're not going to use this today, take those containers with the lids on them, stick them in the refrigerator for about 24 hours, come back the next day when you're ready to make your pizzas, remove the dough balls from the refrigerator, put them on your counter for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, trying to bring them up to kind of room temperature. They don't have to be quite room temperature, but warm them up a little bit, get the chill out of them, and then you're ready to proceed to the next step. I'm going to put these dough balls away, and then I'm going to meet you back here, and we're going to start finally making our pizza. So we've done all this work to make the perfect dough. Now let's build the perfect pizza. In order to start, the first thing we're going to have to do is prepare our pan. And what I have here is the Breville Pizzaiolo pan. Exactly the way it is. This is the handle. We don't need this right now. I'm going to put this in front of me. And what I have here is some unsalted butter. When we put this into our pan, it's going to cause this barrier between the pan and the crust and almost give us this flaky texture like the crust is frying inside of this pan. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, get into the corners of this pan and give this a nice wipe here all the way around. I'm looking for a thin layer of butter here. If you don't eat any kind of dairy, there's other things you can put in there as well. Whatever it is, just make sure the idea is that we're going to be almost frying this crust in the pan. So please put something. Even though this is a nonstick pan, it works really, really good with this. And you can see just with that small knob of butter, I'm able to get all around. Make sure you get all the way up the sides and around the edges. And if you feel like it, take the pan and hold it in your hands if that helps you. And then as you kind of work your way around, I can see all the spots that need a little bit more. And just that simple, this pan is done. I've also done this plenty of times to recreate another very famous Chicago pizzeria. And what I do is I take this butter, now that the pan is seasoned, I put this and shake a little bit of Parmesan cheese, grated Parmesan into here, almost like we're flouring a cake pan. And once the Parmesan is in there, then we'll take that dough, press it inside, and then all of you who love a great frico crust, maybe you've seen a Detroit pizza video recently, you'll know that beautiful caramelized edge on the side, how beautiful that is on sides of pizza. And you'll also be able to do your Chicago deep dish the same way. Now that this is ready, I need to get my dough. Okay, my dough is out now. I let it rest on the counter for about an hour and a half. As you grab this dough out of the bowl, it's going to deflate. So don't be upset if you see that all of a sudden it goes flat. What I'm going to do though is I'm getting underneath the dough, and the idea is that I want to place this upside down in here. I don't want to stretch this any more than I have to, because the work we're going to do in stretching is right now. Now that the dough is in the pan just like this, if you feel more comfortable, maybe you still got a little bit of that butter on your fingers, but if you don't, take a little bit of the butter here from the sides, get them on the tips of your fingers, and then almost like you're playing the piano. We don't play the piano like this, right? We play the piano like this. I want you to use that same dimpling action. Push down onto the dough, and all of a sudden, like magic, it goes exactly where we need to. The idea here is that I started in the middle, not on the edge. I'm starting in the middle and working in one direction, and then I'm going to turn this pan, and I'm going to get the side that hasn't been touched, and I'm going to dimple in the opposite direction. All the air bubbles, if I was to start on this side and dimple all the way across, all the air would build up pressure and they would be released the other side, and we're going to lose all of those bubbles. But in splitting the difference like this, half and half, we're going to retain those bubbles inside of the gluten structure, and you're going to get a much lighter, open, airier crust. I only want you to stretch to the diameter of the pan, just like this. Don't go up the sides yet. What I want you to do is go ahead and proofread your work. Make sure that we have an even, uniform base here. It's really critical that one spot isn't thinner than another. And what I'm seeing here, if you look at my hands, my fingers are physically bending and I'm pushing with a flat hand. I'm not overworking this. I'm keeping all those bubbles. And as you can see right here, I've got all these beautiful bubbles still inside of my dough, which is going to give me a beautiful, light, airy crust. Once I feel that everything is nice and uniform, I'm going to go ahead, give this that one more nice dimple, and you're going to see why here in a second. Now that this is all uniform in the middle, I'm going to take the sides of my hands, this part here, and I'm going to push up against the side of the pan, and the dough is going to slide upwards. And as I do this, be careful. You don't want to make a thin spot on the corner of where the pan, the sidewall meets the bottom. I don't want it too thin here, but I want to take enough dough and just push it up along the side wherever it's going to go. This isn't an art project, guys. The better you do this, more rustic, the better the final result is going to look. So go ahead, just kind of push from the sides, making this nice and smooth. And then the last thing I want you to do, starting from the middle, push up from the middle to the corners. And that's going to ensure that if you did press any thin spots, nobody will ever know that it was a thin spot at all. It'll be perfectly baked. Now that I have the dough in the pan, I'm ready for my mozzarella. I like to use whole milk mozzarella for this, because we went already and put all this full fat into the dough and all this extra stuff in there. Why not go the bonus round and really make this beautiful and cheesy? And the best way to do that is by using whole milk mozzarella. If you're afraid of the amount of fat in whole milk mozzarella, please by all means use part skim mozzarella. But what's going to happen is you might notice that the cheese at the end might feel a little bit drier or stringier when we pull it. I'm going to start to layer this mozzarella up to the side of the dough against the side walls here. And I want you to go all the way around. Don't really need to overlap it too much because this is going to be a lot of mozzarella here. So if there's a little gap, don't be afraid. But the idea is that we've got total coverage of this mozzarella on the pizza. I'm just going to continue going around in a circle like this until I have the outsides touching. Even if the mozzarella goes a little bit higher inside of the pan, it's no big deal because it will caramelize against the edge of that pan and it's going to look so beautiful, artisan, like it's homemade. Some of the best pizzerias in Chicago have had that look for 50, 60 years and they've built empires on there. Who knows? You might be the next pizza champion in your neighborhood. I'm going to fill in all the gaps in the middle. And then if you have any mozzarella left over, this is the perfect time to say, have I been a little cheap in some areas or not? Take a slice like this, cut it in half, and then just fill in all of those gaps. In my opinion, you can't make this too cheesy. The next thing that we're going to do is take that beautiful pizza sauce that we just had. I like to use a ladle just like this. Get a nice ladle, put it right in the center of this pan, maybe a scoop and a half, depends on how big your ladle is. From here, what I like to do, I like to take the pan and I like to give this a little jiggle. And all of a sudden, we can get this beautiful tomato sauce into all the little nooks and crannies. If you need a little bit more sauce, take a little bit more sauce, put it on. You can also do this by spreading this way, just give it a nice turn. But what you don't want to do is go over the edge of where the mozzarella is. And what's going to happen here all of a sudden, we're going to have this beautiful tomato sauce that gets concentrated. You can see all of that gorgeous pulp, that tomato pulp that's inside over here, and it's going to be super sweet, robust. I can smell that garlic. And the next step, and this is the final finishing step, we always take some Parmigiano Reggiano. All of a sudden, we recognize exactly what this is. There's no doubt about it. This is a beautiful Chicago deep dish pizza. I love to do one more thing. I love to take a little bit of that oregano. I like to put just a little bit of oregano on top, just like this, and we're all done. Don't put any oil now at this point because when the pizza comes out of the oven, we'll be able to see the top of this. If the top looks like it dried a little bit too much, maybe you cooked your sauce a little too long, or maybe you had a tomato that didn't have that much moisture, then we can give a beautiful drizzle of olive oil at the end. But for right now, this is ready to go into the oven. It's so simple to do. All I'm going to take is the handle of my pan. I've got the notch right here that this is going to go into. And then this is kind of like a little lever. We stick it in here and then it doesn't move. This will support that heavy pizza. My oven has been preheated on the pan setting. Once I'm ready to go, I'm going to be looking for the little LED light that says at temp. We want that light to be steady. We don't want it blinking. When it's blinking, that means that the oven is still warming up. My oven right now is on the pan setting and it's ready to go. So let's take our pizza. I'm going to open the door. Look at that. The stone comes out towards me. I'm going to place the pizza into the oven and then I'm going to set it so that it's uniform with the stone. Let go, close the door, and it's ready to go. The last thing is very important. The button that says timer is set for 18 minutes automatically. Take that button, push it in, you'll hear it click, you'll see the little light start to flash, and now our pizza is baking. Let's come back in 18 minutes and we'll see how it came out. We'll see you soon. By the smell of my kitchen and the sound of that bell, our pizza's ready. I can't wait to see what came out. Here we go, guys. You ready? Oh, man. Look at this. Perfectly golden brown around the edges. Can you see how that sauce is bubbling? I've got a pie server like this. You can just use an offset spatula, anything that you have that you can kind of get around here, all around the edge to make sure that if it is sticking a little bit of that cheese, and then you'll be able to just pop this out of the pan just like that. And look at this crust. Can you see that beautiful golden edge? This is so gorgeous all the way around. Now, you have two options. Number one, you can say, I'm going to be the sacrificial lamb, and I'm going to eat this boiling hot as it is, scald the top of my mouth, and get that beautiful, amazing cheese pull. Or you can wait 4 or 5 minutes, let this cool and set up, and then go in and cut it. I don't know about you, I can't wait anymore. So let's go ahead and cut this thing, all right? I'm going to use just a regular knife, but in Chicago, we use these, actually, they call them rocker knives, or maybe a cheese knife that we would cut like a guillotine from here, cut all the way down. I'm just going to find where the center point of this is, and I'm going to, can you hear that snap? I'm going to find a beautiful slice here, find the other slice right here. Now that I've got this pizza cut, it's ready to serve. I got my plate ready to go. I'm going to get the perfect slice from under here. And then all of a sudden, all of that ooey gooey cheese coming right off of the side. Look at that, guys. Are you kidding me? This is what it's all about. Chicago-style pizza at its best. I hope you guys enjoy. I can't wait to bite into this, but I've done this enough times to know this is too hot for me. I'm going to wait a minute. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, we would love to hear from you. You can go to that Breville Plus app, find my recipe there, and I hope to see you guys all very soon. Ciao.